Framing matters just as much with our mindsets as it does with our money. So keep listening to learn how to get ahead when it comes to your personal finances. This is the Physician Philosopher Podcast. I'm Dr. Jimmy Turner, an anesthesiologist, online entrepreneur, and creator of the Alpha Coaching Experience. The Physician Philosopher Podcast teaches you how to create the life you deserve, one thought at a time. Start before you're ready. Start by starting. Start now. Hey, everyone. Welcome to episode number 67 of the Physician Philosopher Podcast, where we take an uncurated and unapologetic look into physician life, money, and mindset. So today's thought is this. If we want the freedom that money can provide, we must operate against our fear-based money mindset. All right. So what's up, everybody? I'm super excited actually to talk about this episode. Many of you know that my two favorite topics, I guess there are three, to teach, to talk, to podcast about our money, mindset, and time management. And so specifically, we're going to discuss the importance of being intentional with your money and how our mindset around money actually really impacts our potential for financial success. And this is really important because, I often say that, money is a means to an end. It's not the end itself. It's the gas that you put in the car to get to your destination. Again, it's not the destination itself. And so we've got to also be honest, though, in noting that money is one of the items that makes physicians stay in a broken situation, right? When you're upside down in student loan debt, you're trapped with a non-compete in your contract, and you don't have enough non-clinical cash flow from something outside of money, outside of medicine. This often makes doctors feel like they don't have a choice. Like, I got to stay because of the money. Like, I got this lifestyle I want to afford, and if I leave, I won't be able to do it, and I've got all this debt. And so, in a way, financial success is freedom. Money is freedom. It is a surrogate for your time. And if you have enough money, you can do what you want, when you want, for as long as you want. And this includes standing up for the change that we know medicine needs. So money plays a part. It's a huge tool. And it's one of the reasons why that's one of the three things that we talk about in the Alpha Coaching Experience with our clients, money, mindset, and time. And in our journey to help burned out doctors become self-determined physicians, right? We talk about the three ABCs, the three letters, the ABCs of self-determined physicians: autonomy, belonging, and competence. And money plays a huge part with people's ability to control their life, to stand up for the change that they need, to fight back. And so this is why money is one of my favorite things to teach doctors. And it's one of the reasons why the tagline on the Physician Philosopher website used to be "Fighting Burnout with Financial Independence." Money is a huge deal. So we're going to talk about that today. And, if I could convince you of one thing that would really make the biggest difference when it comes to your financial success, it would be that, and by you, I mean we humans, are irrational. So you heard that right. You may think that you make really logical decisions when it comes to money, but study after study after study shows that we are not logical, we are not rational, we are irrational. And this is why when it comes to this topic of personal finance, the most important aspect of money isn't what to do with your money, it's how you think about it. And so people always want to know, like, hey, should I do this or should I do that? And I could literally tell you everything you want to know about 401ks and governmental versus non-governmental 457s and backdoor Roth IRAs and the whole nine yards. But if you don't know how you think about money, it really doesn't matter. And so on this show, we're going to talk about, a big mental construct that people have around money that'll help you be, better with investing specifically. So when it comes to investing money in the market, there are a few things that you really have to know in order to be successful. And the first thing that I want to point out to you is that you're not rational, you're irrational. And if I had to show this to you in person, this is what I would do. When I give talks on personal finance, I'll often take a $100 bill out of my wallet. I usually borrow it from my buddy Mike because I don't carry cash like I should. Mike always has money. And Mike, can I borrow a $100 bill? I got a talk coming up, and then I'll give it to him afterwards, give back to him. But I'll hold the $100 bill up in front of the audience and say, hey, I've got this $100 bill, and I want to know if you're willing to take a bet. So we're going to flip a coin, and if you win, you get $100. You get this $100 that's in my hand. But if you lose, you owe me $100. So heads, you get to keep my $100. Tails, you owe me $100. And then I ask the audience, like, hey, put your hand up if you'd be willing to take that bet. And usually, because oftentimes I'm talking to residents or medical students, they will keep their hand down. They'll say, no, I'm not willing to take that bet. And if it's an attending physician, sometimes they'll say, hey, how about $1,000? Some sum of money that's consequential to you. And then I will point out that not many people are raising their hands and say, okay, what if we sweetened the pot a little bit? What if we made it where you win $150 if you win, and if I win, I only get the same $100? And then usually a few more hands will go up. But it's really not until we get to like 200 to 100 where like they win $200 if they win and I lose $100 or I win $100 if I win, that the overwhelming majority of hands go up. So said differently, basically, until it gets to 2-to-1 odds, most people will not take that bet. And the reason that thought experiment usually works that way is because we hate losing money. In fact, Daniel Kahneman, for anyone listening, I'm a big fan of Kahneman and Tversky's work and Thaler as well. But you will hate losing money as a human. It's just the way that we're wired. And that doesn't mean that there aren't people out there that are big risk takers that this doesn't apply to. But for the vast, vast majority of us, and even to those risk takers in the right scenario, it matters. And the reason why is because it triggers your fear center, the amygdala in your brain. You're like, no way, I hate this. It's called loss aversion. And loss aversion is the reason that many people make massive financial mistakes. And in fact, loss aversion is actually the reason that a lot of people stay in a job that they don't like too. So instead of looking for what they stand to gain by changing jobs or having that tough conversation or making the difference at work, many will focus on what they stand to lose. Most of our perspectives are on loss. And because we hate losing so much, in fact, we hate losing twice as much as we like winning, we have a tendency to stay in jobs and bad work situations that aren't great for us because we are worried about that potential loss. And so this is called loss aversion. And this loss aversion is really important because it impacts the way that we think about money, the way that we think about decisions with our job, and a whole variety of other things. And specifically when it comes to investing, loss aversion has a huge potential to impact your finances. And the reason why is because, again, we pay more attention to those losses. And so this comes from our average hatred of losing money. And this is why when the market goes down, people have a tendency to just freak out. So this happened recently, and I'll give you an example here in a minute of another time when it has also happened. But even though when the market goes down, you see your account go down, you haven't actually lost anything until you sell, right? Like it's just a number on a screen. It's not, you haven't actualized the loss is what it's called in personal finance. Like it's just a paper loss. But people have a really hard time watching their $500,000 portfolio turn into $400,000 or their $1 million portfolio turn into $850,000. And this is one of the many reasons that it actually pays to ignore your investments. It's one of those weird areas of life where actually paying attention to something more often can get you in trouble, and like this doesn't apply to so many other areas of life, right? Like if you pay less attention to your marriage or to your kids or to your job, like usually bad things happen. But when it comes to your investments, paying less attention, particularly if you don't have the ability to stay in the market, like you don't have that discipline to stay in the market when you see it go down, can have massive consequences. I often tell people that two of the biggest mistakes you can make financially are getting divorced and selling when the market's down. Like it's that catastrophic. And multiple studies have showed that the more often you check your investments, just in case you think that like I'm just making this up, that if you check your investments more often, you are more likely to actually make a change. In other words, to sell, and therefore you're less likely to make more money. So this is called myopic loss aversion. It's been studied multiple times, and myopic meaning you pay close attention to it, and when you do, you're more likely to be averse to the losses you see, and you'll take your money out. So you read that right, like myopic loss aversion. You heard that right. Paying more attention to your investments actually leads to lower returns. And so if you know that, then you'll know, okay, well, I want to pick something that I don't have to pay close attention to, that I can just check in on occasionally, when I want to rebalance my portfolio or, do something like that, but you don't want to be keeping an eye on it every day. And this is one really big reason why people that pick individual stocks do so poorly, because when you pick individual stocks, you are much more likely to want to keep a close eye on it. And you got the app on your phone, you can see what the stocks are doing. And people are like, no, but like I'm really good at, investing and, doing research and yada, yada, yada. And it's fine. It's their money. I always joke around like you can do whatever you want with your money. I'm not losing a dime. But if you want to be a solid investor, honestly, this is one thing that you have to understand is that when you do that, you are more likely to check it and you are more likely to sell. And so you have to be able to have the discipline to keep your investments where they are, which is one reason I'm a huge advocate for lazy investment portfolios that they're not sexy. They don't, they're not going to be the thing that you're going to talk around the water cooler in the physician lounge. Like, they're just easy to ignore. And if you can't ignore it, I genuinely believe that if you got your best friend, like you said, hey, I'm going to pay you $200 to change my password on my investment accounts, and you owe me the $200 back if you ever tell me what the password is. Like, you would do better in that situation than if you sold all of your investments. Like, it's better to just not know the password to your account. So one way that we can deal with this irrational thing, right? So how do we fight back against this loss aversion and our tendency to pay more attention to losses, that myopia we have? And one way we can do this is through framing. So what is framing? Well, the way that I explain this to people is, when it comes down to surgery, for example, I'll talk to my residents all the time about consenting patients for procedures and the way that you talk to patients and how it matters. And when you remember that you're not rational, it helps kind of, put this in perspective. And a lot of people are like, well, no, like I'm totally rational. And when I consent patients, like, like I just give them the information and let them make the decision. And it's like, it's not that clean. Like, I wish there was this world where, patriarchal medicine was just gone for good. And like, we could just give patients information and let them make decisions. But the way that you speak to people impacts how they make their decision. So there's a great study, classic study from the 1980s where they did this. So they took these lung cancer patients and they basically said, hey, surgery versus radiation. Surgery has a much, much, better long-term survival if you have surgery when compared to radiation, right? And they told them the same information, but then they broke them up into two groups. And in one group, they told them like, hey, if you proceed with surgery, there's a 90% chance of making it off the table. There's a 90% chance of surviving the surgery. That has a much better chance at long-term survival, right? And the other group, they told them like, hey, there's a 10% chance that you might die, right? So one was framed in terms of survival. One was framed in terms of mortality. And when the patients were told that there was a 90% chance of survival, 82% of them chose surgery. So this was the positive frame, right? And when patients were told that they had a 10% chance of dying on the table, which is the same exact statistic, only said differently, 56% of people proceeded with surgery. So in other words, it went from 18% choosing radiation therapy to 44% when the frame was negative, when it brought into context the 10% chance of dying on the table, despite all of the other information being the same. And so like you can pretend to yourself that like the way that you talk to patients is you just provide information and help them make decisions, but that's not how people work. When you tell them that there's a 90% chance of survival versus a 10% chance of death, like the objective person will say, well, that's the same information. It turns out that it impacts the way people make decisions. And the same can be said about personal finances. When you see the market going down, how do you frame that situation? You can view this as a loss, like, oh, my $1 million portfolio just turned into $850,000. I'm losing money. Or you can say, nope, I invest money every month, and this is an opportunity to buy stocks on sale, right? Stocks are at a discount right now because the market is down. And if I keep dollar cost averaging, in other words, I keep putting money in each month into the market, this month I'm getting them on sale, right, at a lower discounted price. And just framing it that way, as you're listening to this, if you've never heard that kind of rhetoric before, immediately it's like, oh, yeah, I can see that. Because if you understand the historical nature of the market, like I'm not feeding you magic beans. Like the market has had an upward trajectory for forever. When you look at it from a big standpoint, right? So you get rid of that myopia where you're paying close attention to every little dip and dive that happens day to day in the market, and you take a big picture view over the last 100, 150 years, the historical average is like 10%, right? 10% returns on your money. So you put $100 in the market, you get $10 back. You put $1 million in, you get 10% back. And so that said, that doesn't mean it's 10% every year. It means that some years it went up by 10%. Other years went down by 20%. The next year it went up by 30%. Like the numbers, and these are all obviously made up numbers. The point is that it's a bumpy ride. Like the short term is always bumpy. It goes up, it goes down, but the overall positive trajectory of the market will continue. And so if you understand that, then you're like, oh yeah, this is one of those points where it dips. But when I buy now, 50 years from now, it's going to be on average up. And so I have a chance to buy stocks on sale. And the second aspect you have to understand about like the historical nature of the market, to bring us back to the rational side of you, which is totally fighting against everything that I'm saying right now, is that studies also show that when the market goes down, you're the most likely to sell. Interestingly, when the market goes down, the market is often over half of the time followed by one of the biggest gains in market history. So said differently, the times that our loss aversion is going berserk and we want to sell because the market's going down, these periods are almost always, not always, but often, more often than not, followed by some of the best days in the market where you just can't stand not to be in. Like, it would really cost you. And there have been, Morningstar's done studies on this, Business Insider's done studies on this, JP Morgan's done studies on this. And when you take your money out and you miss one of those best days over a 10-year period, your returns plummet. And if you don't believe me, let's just go back to March of 2020, right? So I pulled up the information in front of me here, right? So in March of 2020, you might remember that the pandemic, right, was coming into full bloom, and the market started going down, and so people started freaking out. And many people sold stocks. Many people sold their assets during this time because they're like, oh, this pandemic's happening, it's crashing the market. Like, I'm going to get out, I'm going to move everything to cash, and then I'm going to buy back in when the market recovers, right? And so based on what I just told you, that half the time, some of the biggest gains in the market happen right after some of the biggest losses when you're most likely to sell. Let's see if that holds up, right? So a few dates here. So we've got the second biggest loss ever, percentage-wise, in the market, March 16th of 2020, is a 13% loss, right? And if you go down to March 12th, 4 days before that, 10% loss. That's the fifth biggest loss ever. And the 13th biggest loss was March 9th, 8% loss. So you have 3 days within a 2-week period where we experienced the biggest losses in market history according to the Dow Jones. And these in terms of percentage points, right? So this isn't like, the market is higher now, and so, the total drops, are kind of out of proportion. This is percentage drops, right? And so, well, let's see. Did some of the biggest gains happen, like I'm telling you? Like, did some of those biggest gains happen around the same period? Well, interestingly enough, the fourth biggest gain ever, a 12% gain, was March 24th of 2020. And the same thing happened March 13th when you had a 9% gain. And the 19th biggest gain at almost 8% was April 6th. So those 3 dates where the market went down and people were most likely to sell, and their amygdala, that fear-mongering, part of your brain that just says, hey, loss is bad, loss is bad, loss is bad, were immediately followed by 3 of the biggest gains percentage-wise in the Dow Jones history over the last 100 years. So if you realize that March 12th, 9th, 12th, and 16th of 2020 were followed by the 13th, 24th, and the April 6th, the biggest gains, you'd realize, oh, maybe this really is an opportunity to buy stocks on sale. So you can use that rational side of your brain to realize that staying in the market is arguably one of the most important things when it comes to personal finance and investing. As Sir John Templeton says, I love this quote. He basically says something like the 4 most expensive words in the English language are "this time it's different." And when you let that sink in, you realize, oh, I just need to have an asset allocation and an investment portfolio that is easy to ignore, that will allow me to stay in the market, that will not let this, amygdala, fear center go crazy. And this isn't new. Like, none of this is new. Like, even before the 2020s, JP Morgan did a study, I think it was from 95 to 14, and they showed that 60% of the time, the 10 best days in the market occurred within 2 weeks of the worst days of the market, 10 worst days over that, 20-year period. So this happens all the time. If you understand market history and you understand that you're irrational and that you want to sell when you lose, you have to invest in stuff that just is easy to ignore and or be disciplined enough to be able to look at the market and to not change. So in coaching, we spend a ton of time working with clients on their ability to tolerate negative feelings. And this is usually, pertaining to life decisions, right? Changing jobs, having a tough conversation with the chair or the boss or the administrator or what have you. And the reason why is because all of our decisions in life are motivated by our feelings, right? So those patients in the study that got told there's 90% chance of success of getting off the table, like, oh, yeah, that's pretty good odds. But the people are told there's a 10% chance of dying, like, oh, I might die. And it totally changed their decisions. And that was motivated by their fear, by their feelings, right? Every decision we make is motivated by our feelings. And so we can either let fear and anxiety and worry that we have about money or about our life dictate our actions, or we can learn how to coexist with negative feelings and learn how to tolerate them and to allow them, and for them not to choose necessarily what our actions are. We can actually separate our feelings from the action. So the next time the market goes down, or the next time you have something tough happen at work, you can remember the importance of not letting negative feelings override your actions, and that your brain, remember that your brain is wired to hate losing. And so when you know that about yourself, it allows you to have a better opportunity to be like, okay, I'm freaking out right now. Is this really justified? Do I really need to change anything? Or is my brain just trying to protect me? Because that's kind of its job, right? Is to protect you. And so it constantly is looking out for things that are bad, like when the market goes down or when something changes at work. So don't let your lower animal brain control your actions, because fear doesn't have to win. You can stay the course even when your loss aversion tells you otherwise. So, as we round out this show, I want you to think about the things in your life that you're avoiding because that lower animal brain is telling you that there's this giant risk and that you're going to lose it all. And whether that comes to investing or, decisions that you have in life or what you might be avoiding, like when you can learn to act in spite of the risk of fear and failure, that is when you can really unlock financial success. It's also when you can make the change you need to make it work. You can have the tough conversation. You can need to make the change that you have. You can make the change that you need to make, and so much more. And so don't let fear win, but recognize that you are an irrational human being, and fear is going to come up. It's a normal part of life. Anxiety is going to come up, but you don't let it have to dictate your actions, whether that's with your financial decisions or with your career decisions, right? So also, I wanted to throw this out there at the end of the show, because if you're listening at this point, you're a real listener. We wanted to make sure that you're aware of a new opportunity for you. So we listen to feedback and take it very, very seriously at the Physician Philosopher. And so we've been getting some feedback from people. And so if you're considering getting coaching to learn how to master, the mindset, the money, the time, the 3 topics we love talking about on this show, so you can practice medicine on your terms, we are now providing an opportunity for you to book a coaching consult call with me to see if coaching's right for you. So if you've thought about going down this road, you're not sure, what exists out there, what the opportunities are, you're considering getting coaching, we want to make sure that you're getting the help that you need. So if you want to book a consult call with me, to do this, you can visit thephysicianphilosopher.com/consult. And I love jumping on calls with people and pointing you in the right direction, whether that's with opportunities with us or with opportunities with other people. We just want you to get the help that you need ultimately. So today's thought is this: if we want the freedom that money can provide, we must operate against our fear-based money mindset. So until next time, my friends, start before you're ready. Start by starting. Start now. I will see you next week.